The Pittsburgh Penguins and Chicago Blackhawks have just made a trade. While it may not be a blockbuster, it's still a very interesting move. We'll discuss the details right now. Hey everybody, so the Pittsburgh Penguins and Chicago Blackhawks have completed a trade this afternoon. It's a 1-for-1 deal sending Sam Lafferty from Pittsburgh to Chicago and Alex Nylander from Chicago to Pittsburgh. This is definitely an interesting deal. Lafferty's a depth forward, fourth line type guy for the Penguins who now is going to Chicago. And Alex Nylander is a former top 10 draft pick in the NHL and a very talented player who just hasn't really put it all together and hasn't worked out to become a full-time NHLer yet in his career. And to see this trade, it's definitely going to raise some eyebrows as far as value going one way or the other. But let's take a deeper look at it here and talk about this from the perspective of both teams as to why they might want to make this deal. So first, we have Alex Nylander. Obviously, he was a very, very highly touted prospect, 8th overall pick in the 2016 draft by the Buffalo Sabres. He ended up being traded to Chicago, and now Chicago is trading him to Pittsburgh. He is a winger, 23 years old now, 6'1", 192 pounds. Just hasn't really worked out at the NHL level. He's only played 84 career games and has 32 career points. He played his closest thing to a full NHL season was back in 2019-2020 with Chicago, where in 65 games he had 10 goals, 16 assists for 26 points, and was a -2. But he hasn't played in the NHL since. He missed all of the 2021 season because of an injury, and he's been healthier this year, but down in the AHL and hasn't played an NHL game. So he's kind of been stuck in the minors and has not at any point in his career been able to stick at the NHL level. Obviously, the knee injury in 2021 was really unfortunate because he did play much of the 2020 season up in the NHL, but then the injury kind of was a big setback in his career, and he hasn't gotten back to the NHL since then. So Nylander at this point is kind of a failed top 10 pick with obvious talent, but has not been able to put it together and hasn't been able to, really become a full-time NHL player. Obvious upside here for the Pittsburgh Penguins just as far as potential and talent goes, but he is 23. He's only played 84 career NHL games and, not a sure bet anymore, to say the least, to become a full-time NHLer. On the other side of things, we have Sam Lafferty. Sam Lafferty is also a winger. He is a little bit older at 26 years old. He's kind of been a fourth-line grinder type for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was a fourth-round pick back in the 2014 draft. And this season, he's played 10 games with Pittsburgh. He's got a couple of assists. He's got 12 penalty minutes. Really hasn't done a whole lot. In his career, he's played 94 games. He's got 6 goals, 15 assists for 21 points and a -1 rating. So if we look at Lafferty, he made his NHL debut with Pittsburgh, played 50 games in 2019-2020. He had 13 points, 23 penalty minutes, a +5, was a good kind of fourth-line type guy. In the 2021 season, he played 34 out of the 56 games. He had no goals, but did have 6 assists, was a -6, 25 penalty minutes, again, fourth liner. And then so far this year, he's only played 10 games. He's got a couple of assists, as we talked about. So he's kind of, I guess, been passed on the depth chart a little bit. He hasn't been playing as much this year, hasn't been as valuable of a piece for the Penguins. And they've decided to move on and ship him out. So he's 26 years old. He's been pretty much a career depth forward. It's probably all he's ever going to be at this point, is either a fourth liner or an extra forward, is like your 13th, 14th guy as a healthy scratch. That's what he is. He's a depth piece. And, I can understand Pittsburgh being willing to move on from him because they have some other guys that kind of play that exact same role. Alex Nylander, on the other hand, definitely, I think, has a little bit more upside. I mean, he was a top 10 NHL pick. There was a reason he went that high in the draft. Now, obviously, to this point, he in no way has come close to living up to that. He's been a failed first rounder to this point in his career, but he did have 26 points back in 2019-2020. And, that 26 points is more than Sam Lafferty's had in his entire career. So, there is more upside here with Nylander. I think there's more potential here with Nylander. He just hasn't worked out yet. So, looking at this from a Pittsburgh Penguins standpoint, I think this trade 100% makes a ton of sense for the Pittsburgh Penguins to try and do. I mean, you're giving up Sam Lafferty, who is a depth forward, a replaceable player, that you have other guys that can fill that role. It's not really taking anything away from the Penguins, and they're getting in a former top 10 pick who hasn't worked out, who maybe needs a change of scenery, maybe just needs a new situation and a new chance to try and get his career back on track. Even if he doesn't, even if Nylander plays for Wilkes-Barre Scranton and is down in the AHL and never even makes it up to the NHL, there's no real risk here if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins. There's no reason not to try it because you've got a pretty decent potential with Alex Nylander, and you're not really giving anything up. So there's really no risk to do this if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's worth a shot. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't really matter. If it does, then great. You just added a pretty good secondary scoring piece to your NHL lineup if Nylander can get his act together and actually get himself in the NHL. For Chicago, I'm a little more, I mean, maybe a Chicago fan can fill me in more on, why the Blackhawks might have been, wanting to do this, but I feel like they just didn't really get much in return. Now, obviously, Nylander's not going to fetch you much at this point because, we're in, how many years now since he's been drafted, he still hasn't become an NHL player. It's got, year 5 now? So, he still hasn't been an NHL guy and doesn't really look like that higher, surefire prospect that he was when he was drafted. But still, like, the gap here in potential and value still seems to be a little bit large. Like, Sam Lafferty is 26 years old. He is what he is. Sam Lafferty isn't just going to burst into a 20-goal scorer now. Like, he's a fourth liner / extra forward who's going to be that for pretty much the rest of his career, most likely, maybe 10 to 15 points a season. And that's what he is. And that's fine. Every team needs depth players. But it feels like Nylander's potential is so much greater than what Lafferty is ever going to be. And, even if Nylander doesn't hit that, it's at least still worth it to have that potential. Now, I'm sure Chicago has been trying to move Alex Nylander. I'm sure that they've probably, seen enough and been like, this isn't really going anywhere. And we're ready to move on. I don't know. I feel like they didn't really get much for him. And this is a move where Lafferty kind of just is what he is, and Nylander might be what he is, but might have some upside to him that Lafferty doesn't. But I certainly do understand Chicago being ready to move on from Nylander. It doesn't look like he's really going to amount to a first-round pick status, and certainly not a top 10 first-round pick status. But, again, he's still 23. That's the other thing. Nylander's 3 years younger than Lafferty, so he has a little bit more time to try and reach what he could be at the NHL level. But all in all, I think it's an interesting trade. It's not exactly one I expected to happen today, but Chicago gets a depth forward, a gritty grinder type guy in Lafferty who doesn't bring a whole lot offensively, but will work along the boards, will hit, can stick up for his teammates when he needs to. And, provides that, fourth line type guy or that extra forward type guy that every team needs. And Pittsburgh is just taking a flyer here on Alex Nylander. Whether he becomes an NHL player or not, they really didn't give much up. I think Lafferty was a very expendable piece for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Nylander at least has some upside potential to become a decent secondary scorer. He's still fairly young and might still be able to salvage somewhat of an NHL career out of it. And if not, Pittsburgh really didn't lose anything, so it really doesn't matter. So, all in all, I think it's a pretty interesting trade, but Alex Nylander is now a Pittsburgh Penguin, and Sam Lafferty is now a Chicago Blackhawk. With that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, links to our merchandise store, memberships, and donations are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.